I am Dungeon Thrasher Lenny Blade, and this is the Dungeons and Thrashers show. And yes, as you've seen from the title of the video, I finally got it to the table with my gaming group, and we did a mammoth session of, I think it went on from 10 a.m. with like a half an hour break for lunch, and then we went on to almost 6 p.m. I think, so you do the math, a lot of hours. And it was a fun but a little bit confusing experience, but yeah, so let's just take a look, and I will tell you a little bit about how it went, and keep in mind throughout all my comments about how confusing we were and how unclear the rules were. Keep in mind that we were all beginners, you know, I mean not beginner role players, but none of us had played Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay 3rd edition before. Now this is the Fantasy Flight version, the one that comes with all the like the tokens and the action cards and the standees and the career sheets and the custom dice and all of that stuff, wound cards and all that good stuff. So I enjoy it. I enjoyed it a lot. I would like to run another adventure later on. So what we did was we ran the starter adventure, an eye for an eye, and the one that comes in the core box, sort of the beginner adventure. And yeah, let's take a look. I do have some pictures. I didn't get any video, unfortunately, but I do have some pictures, and I will tell you about what we thought about it, and a little bit of a review over the adventure and the core rule box set, and yeah, and that kind of stuff. So let's go. Okay, so I'm not going to teach you how to play the game. Because first of all, I'm not an expert. As you will see, I made a couple of rules mistakes and character creation mistakes. Also, the video would be 4 hours long or something like that, so I'm not going to do that. But I will tell you the basics just in case you haven't played Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay 3rd edition, because they are very different from the other editions. So this is a dice pool system. So you assemble your dice pool and you roll and you count successes. There are also boons and banes, which represent good things happening and bad things happening. So they are sort of narrative dice. And there are also 3 different stances you can go into to modify the dice pool. So you can go into the reckless stance, in which you switch out regular dice for reckless dice. Now this is high risk, high reward. And there's also a conservative stance, which is the opposite. Low risk and low reward. So it was a pretty neat system, but we will talk a little bit more about what I thought about that later. We decided to use, or I decided to use, pre-made characters. So I actually made characters because there are no pre-made characters in the box set. So I made characters for the players. And I had 3 players joining me. The first one was John, and he played a priest initiate of Sigmar. And then we have Kirk, who played an apprentice wizard. And you may remember Kirk from some of my videos. We've done a couple of double reviews, so you might go and check them out. If you do, you will see Kirk there. And also John is a complete Warhammer 40k nut. so that could be pretty interesting. We also had one more player, and he is the only Thai player. We are based in Korat, Thailand, and that is Mr. Tatum. And he has unfortunately left the group because he went to Australia in a search for happiness and fortune. So good luck to him, and we'll see him later. We eventually got the hang of using spells and the channeling power mechanics and the blessings and the curry favor mechanics. But it was slow in the beginning, and it also took some time to get the talents and the skills and the recharge tokens as well. I also made a couple of really bad rules mistakes. For the first few rounds, I even forgot that toughness soaks damage. That's really embarrassing, and the wizard almost died because of it. I also left the priest initiate with a 2 in toughness. Now this wouldn't normally be a problem for priests, but since he is a priest initiate of Sigmar, he was constantly in the red, the reckless stance, and there's a 20% chance to get fatigue. And once you have fatigue more than your toughness, more fatigue than toughness, then you're in serious trouble. So, but those were my mistakes. So, what did I think about the system as a whole? Let's do the pros first. Very little downtime, I found, which is really good. The players were always engaged in something. They were assembling their dice pools and preparing for their next turn as the other players took theirs. The setting, of course. I love the old world and the grim, sort of chaos-ridden setting, and the fact that you usually play as regular people, messengers and rat catchers, for example. Though in this example, I mean, in this adventure, I made more powerful characters. The stances, I thought, was a very cool mechanic, which worked well, and you know, the combat became a little bit more tactical and more interesting. The component quality, of course. I mean, Fantasy Flight Games rarely disappoints in this. I only have the same complaints as I always do about their products. Hobbit-sized cards and tiny, tiny text. Before the session, I told all of my players to bring your glasses because there's going to be a lot of tiny text to read. Unfortunately, that's a common complaint I have with Fantasy Flight products. Let's talk about the dice, because they are sort of, you know, in the middle. First of all, there weren't enough of them. Fortunately, I bought an extra pack, so we had enough for everyone. But if we had had 2 more players, there would have been a problem. They can also be a little bit confusing for new players, because they are so different, especially if you're not used to narrative dice. But that's also one of the things I liked about it, is that they are narrative. So if they're used correctly, they can... you know, situations can become humorous, and you know, I like narrative dice because they sort of tell their own story. And also, I thought it was a breath of fresh air because it was just different, and it felt nice to play something fresh and new. Okay, so let's talk about the things that I didn't quite care for. First of all, the rulebook. There were very few master lists in the rulebook. For example, the conditions. The condition mechanics relies on these tiny cards, and I had actually misplaced one of them, so we had to wing it. But you can't look in the core rules. There's no list of what conditions do in the rulebook. Also, some of the rules I found were a little bit unclear. For example, when can a priest curry favor outside of, between encounters, outside of combat? So after every encounter, can he just curry favor and then heal everyone? That seems a little bit weird. Also, I found that it requires massive preparation. So random encounters or whipping up encounters on the fly, I think would be time consuming. Now, I haven't tried that yet, so I can't really say. Now, bear in mind that this was our first session, and many of these things will get easier with repeated plays. Now, despite this new and complex rule system, or actually it's not that complex, but there's a lot of fiddly bits to take care of, we managed to get through the adventure and we played from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m., including a pizza break. So all in all, everyone enjoyed themselves, and, we all had a good time, if somewhat confusing at times, but in the end, that's all that matters, right? There's one thing about the adventure as well, an eye for an eye, that it was missing a couple of maps, but it wasn't a really big deal because we did pretty much theater of the mind. And I would also like to crush the the rumor that Fantasy Roleplay 3rd edition is a board game. It is not. We only had 2 encounters that were resolved by combat. There was a lot of role-playing, a lot of exploring, and a lot of things outside of combat. We played for hours and hours, and we just had 2 combat encounters. So it's it's definitely not a board game. I think people see all the fiddly bits and the cards and the tokens and they feel, oh, it's not a role-playing game. I mean, it's up to you. You know what I mean? If you're a good GM, it could still, you know, it is still a role-playing game. It is not a board game. So let's demolish that rumor right away. Anyways, we all enjoyed ourselves, and I'm looking forward to running it again at some point. And I'd like to know what your favorite edition is. And have you played the third edition? And what did you like about it, or what did you not like about it? Anyways, that's it for this time. Talk to you later. See ya!